pick the clips that you guys are showing?
We picked them together, me and Rachel.
They're very cool.
Thank you.
I was very excited.
Yeah, me and Rachel both picked the clips together.
Did you pick this one after I played it for you, or did Rachel?
No, Rachel already picked that.
Oh, she was already on it.
She was already on it.
And was it this version, or was it? If you scan the flyer, you get the playlist.
Oh, that's so
It's
cool.
like a cute code. Yeah, that you put.
You
your
guys
phone
did a good job.
Thanks.
Well,
Well,
very cool.
be sure to tell Jessica.
Yeah,
I'll relay it to her.
I agree. Yeah.
I can take credit for so little, but I'm observing you guys doing a good job.
Thanks. I mean, observing you do that. Welcome, everybody. My name is Kimberly Cook. I'm the education coordinator here at the Pontchartrain Conservancy. We are live at the new Canal Lighthouse. We want to welcome you all. And just let you know, if you'd like to know more about our work, you can visit scienceforourcoast.org. And we're very excited about this event, and I'm going to turn it over. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We are so glad, but we're also going to be talking about community, and the seeds of that community is also with us here tonight as well. There were so many people involved in bringing tonight to fruition, making it possible. There was the New Orleans Healing Center that had the great idea. There was the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities that secured CARES funding through the National Endowment for the Humanities. Then there was the incredible creativity and vision of our speakers tonight, Jessica Dandridge and Rachel Sanderson. For everybody who helped make tonight happen, we're so very grateful. My name is Amy Klipp. I'm a 30-year resident of New Orleans, and I'm a writer by trade who helps people explain and share ideas about living in a complicated place like South Louisiana. But my main job tonight is to be a moderator, which mainly means that I'm going to be inviting you here in the live audience to join us. The speakers and I have so much respect for the lived experience you bring tonight and the deep thinking you've done about the issues that we're going to be talking about. But we are recording the session, so if you'd like to speak, just raise your hand and someone will make sure you have a microphone. We also want to treat you right as our guests, so please feel free to get up, enjoy the refreshments. The restrooms are right behind you through the gift shop. And if any of you have parked at Landry's, maybe nobody did. Nobody did. Oh, good. All right, we're good. One quick word about what we'll be talking about tonight. We're going deep on the problems, of course, and there are many. But we're also going to be talking about the possibilities. And for a discussion like that, we are in fantastic hands because Jessica and Rachel look so squarely in their work at the problems, but they leave so much room for the possibilities, for the partnerships, for the unexpected things that can happen when we come together. So we will be looking at climate change and flooding. We will be talking about the problems of distorted thinking, racism, and poor planning that have created so much injustice in our communities. But we're also going to be talking about the possibilities, because the two are linked, right? The problems and the possibilities. The problems are so big, in fact, we know we can't just tinker around with them, throw a little money at them. We are being pushed to change everything about what community means in South Louisiana, how we create it, how we nurture it, and how we get there. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to our speakers. They will introduce themselves and get us off and running.
Strong. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Dandridge. I'm the Executive Director of the Water Collaborative of Greater New Orleans. I'm born and raised here. I'm a millennial. I've lived all over the city, the whole nine. So I'm really happy that you all were here to make it. Please enjoy yourselves, enjoy the refreshments. There's a restroom inside, so didn't see the inequities, and I wanted to do something about it. So I helped start an organization called Fire Youth Squad. I work with organizations like Rethink, Envela, Puentes, JJPL, and I've stayed in University for political science and sociology, and then I went to the New School in New York City for international security and conflict. How do you go from international? So it came to me. Actually, I met Rachel in that process. So it's funny. We're meant to be friends. We're soul sisters. I came to her when she worked at FFL for funding for education for youth, and she was one of the people on the board at the Water Collaborative, and she helped to get me here in this role, and she's like a sister to me. So with that said, I'm happy to be here, and we're going to have some really deep conversations. I really encourage all of you to participate, add your 2 cents. We want to have lively conversations, so thank you.
Hey everybody, first and foremost, thank you so much for being here. I know that we're in the midst of still adapting to a global pandemic. I know that we just a couple of days ago experienced a tornado in the area, as well as many flash flood events over the past couple of weeks, and we know that you could be anywhere else. Well, maybe with an asterisk there because we're still in a pandemic, right? But you chose to be here, so just thank you so much. It's a real privilege to be able to be here. So my name is Rachel Sanderson. I am a person who is still trying to figure out what their role is within water and my relationship with water and my relationship with thinking about climate change and how we adapt and how we think about the future strategically together, because we cannot do this alone. And so my background, I always like to lead with this. I am not from Louisiana. I make that very clear. I respect and honor the knowledge of every single person who has generational ties, who has lived here for generations, first and foremost. So where am I from? A different river town. So if you follow the Mississippi River all the way up to the Missouri River, there's Kansas City on the west side of Missouri, and I'm from a very small town just northeast of that. So my family generationally has lived within about 10 to 15 miles of the Missouri River at that point in location. I come from a family of folks who are blue-collar workers. My father is a millwright, so I don't know if he's listening, but hello, Dad, if you are. Farmers, butchers, things of that nature. Whenever I was younger, there was a significant storm event that came through really close to where my grandmother lived. And so that was how I started to get interested initially in the weather and nature and thinking about really the relationship that we had to nature, which tornadoes are different than flooding, but regardless, it still requires people to show resilience in the face of disaster. So I think that was a moment in time where my fear of storms turned to fascination. I decided I wanted to be like Helen Hunt from Twister. That was what my dream was. I ended up going to Mississippi State University to study professional meteorology. I did not become Helen Hunt. Dream not realized, but I'm really glad for that. Because at some point during my time at Mississippi State, I started to get really interested in coast and how the coast was changing. I didn't really know where that was taking me. I just knew that I was interested. So that's how I landed at University of New Orleans and got my master's in coastal geomorphology. Whenever I was finishing my thesis, I started interning at the River Forecast Center in February of 2016. So that entity does all of the river forecasts for the entire lower Mississippi River Basin. So I found myself waiting to defend my thesis. I was gutting people's houses, trying to figure out where we go from here, right? It was a moment where we realized that flooding in Louisiana was not just a New Orleans problem. It was not just a coastal problem. It was everybody's problem. So that's how I ended up at Foundation for Louisiana. That's how I met Jessica, and yes, you are one of my soul sisters. Fun fact, we do this all the time, so it's nice to be able to share the space with y'all and to have y'all be a part of the conversation. I went to CPRA, worked on the Coastal Master Plan team for just a little bit, and now I'm actually the Region 7 Watershed Coordinator for the Watershed Initiative. But I'm showing up wearing myself, right? So I'm here as Rachel today. I'm here as the person who is curious, who is invested in figuring out what are the potential solutions to our problems. And so just much gratitude. Thank you for having me here today.
Amazing women. So we're going to start opening things up and inviting you all to weigh in. But first, we're going to play you 2 clips that kind of bring it all home. The first is an excerpt from the documentary Locked by Danita and Patrick Jackson. And that's going to give a bird's eye view of what we're looking at here, where we've gone wrong. Nothing every person sitting here doesn't already know, but it's good to see it all put down in a capsule-like form. And then we're going to see a video that brings it to the personal, that moment where your house is flooded or flooding and you're wondering, how bad is this going to get? What is happening? How can this be happening? It's a woman named Miriam filming her house in Denham Springs during the 2016 flood when 20 inches of rain fell in just 3 days. So let's watch these and then we'll hear from you.
Jamie Love, you were right. Hey, no bleach. Bleach on today. Oh my gosh. almost done. Shut the lights off. There is some water. Alright, let's come quick. Just from the time I walked out there. Now it's in the way.
So the water is rising. You've seen these clips, you've lived some of these things. What do you think we have to learn that we haven't learned quick enough? Thank you. There you go.
Okay, this is not changing. We have to do something to live with water. Because if you look at 1927 and now, we haven't learned the lesson that we have to live and manage water.
All right. Thank you. I think what has to happen, we have to claim back the coast away from the Ponzi scheme of water protectors. I think the levee is a prison wall. It didn't work for Katrina. There's conspiracy that they blew the levee in Betsy in the 9th Ward. You know, the most prone places are where the most disparaged people live, and that's by design. So until you remove the authority of the levee and the Ponzi scheme of taking the land away from the people and access to the water, we won't get anywhere. Because we're fighting with the foundation of the construct of race. And until you get to the root of it, until you call Lake Pontchartrain Oguata, and until you see Chittamaugas and Choctaws and Chapatulas and Humas, until you get back to the source and you recognize that, until you right the wrong, everything you do will crumble. In the same week that children died at Seabrook, there's a report that the Western is getting redeveloped when the Eastern never got developed, when Eastern got underdeveloped. So really, we can speak about it, but until you remove the land away from the people who are do not look at everyone the same. I mean, they have a police station at Leeson Field that separates the waters away from the black side of the lake and what we call the white side of the lake. In front of it is Pontchartrain Beach that crafted heaven. This is structural discrimination. We're redoing Western when the East never got done. So I live with that from then to today. So until we remove our power away from those people, we won't get anywhere.
Rachel and Jessica want to weigh in here?
Listening to, I've seen these videos a million times because we pick them. But for some reason, sitting out by the lake, I just started getting really emotional. I got emotional because every single generation of my family has lived through that. My family lost their property in Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Camille, Hurricane Betsy, and the ancestors who I do not know also lost land, they lost loved ones. And he mentioned in the video about generational trauma and collective memory. And that's what we're working from here in Louisiana. We're not working from a brand new slate. We're working from pain. We're working from distrust. We're working from the ghost, or not even, I'm sorry, not the ghost, the reality, the big boogeyman known as racism, who operates with an invisible hand. I think your comment really spoke to me, because we really, in the way we operate in New Orleans, and I think in Louisiana, and as well as the world, we think we can build ourselves out of injustice. Because of neoliberalism and our idea that if we build and build and build, and if we make a pretty building, that's somehow going to solve racism, or it's going to solve flooding, and that's not true. Obviously, with Katrina, the levees failed, and in the Mr. Go, they were meant to fail. Every single one of these design factors will never solve our problems until we really look at ourselves. One of the things I learned in international security and conflict was the idea of reconciliation. We need that in Louisiana. I'm so happy President Biden came down to see what we're doing, and he's like, oh, we have $100 million for infrastructure. Well, that's not going to be a reconciliation process. Building our way out of injustice and systemic racism and poverty is not the way in which we can fix Louisiana. They built brand new levees, they built new buildings all over the city, but I don't see a change in the people. The same thing, I know we're not talking about the Claiborne overpass, but it's related. They talked about that. I had someone interview me recently and ask, how do I feel about that? I don't care if you tear down an interstate if nobody's being invested in. So it's the same thing with water. We cannot see ourselves out of this situation until we start seeing people as people, looking at their vulnerabilities, looking at their pain, looking at their collective trauma, and using that as a guide to move forward. There's no way we can continue to build ourselves out of that, and that's what that brought to me. And we have not done that. That was 1927, and then we have Mr. Go, over 100 years. And the more we talk about this as climate activists or just activists in general, they're like, well, just another 10 years or another 20 years. Well, we've already been doing this for 100 years and it hasn't worked. So what is the things that are holding us back? And I think that's what I struggle with every day.
Yeah, and I also want to echo what Jessica had said earlier about being emotional in this space. In particular, it's having watched those videos multiple times, found myself also getting teary-eyed, and then I think also the context of the two comments that we just received as well, I think are really powerful and speak to that moment. And I think what Jessica is saying about how we've been operating and doing this work from a place of trauma, from a place of where we have built systems of injustice that have supported the oppression of people for the purpose of funding different things, whether that's a project, whether it's the government, whatever it might be. The reality is that whenever we are working from those systems of injustice, we are continuing to perpetuate that system of trauma. That trauma will exist as long as we have this system, as long as that system is upheld. And so I think one of the opportunities that we have with climate change is as we sit here in this beautiful location at the lake, where surely we can see what the impacts of climate change look like firsthand. We know that the lake levels have changed over time. We know that flooding across the road happens often here. I'm told whenever the waves get high enough, they start to splash over the walls. But what does it actually look like for us to heal through our relationship as we think about how we really adapt to climate change, how we think about climate justice, how we rebuild community in ways that are not perpetuating the same systems that have created the trauma that we are forced to work with, which is creating these continued really developments and structures that we see that are sometimes necessary to be able to protect people, but at the same time, as the gentleman pointed out here earlier, that is not an equal investment that we have seen in many places. I think whenever I think at least about the 2016 flood events, there are people who have still never fully recovered. There are people who have still never fully recovered from Katrina. There are people still waiting to come home, right? And I think that's the opportunity for the conversation that we have to have. How are we rebuilding communities in ways that heal our collective trauma? Because it is collective, right? Even if you didn't flood, if your entire city floods, You got to find a new drugstore, grocery store. You got to find a new bank. Your entire life changes based on that disaster recovery cycle. And so I think, again, the opportunity that we have is to be able to lean into our relationship with the land, with water, and really think about how we create systems that mimic those natural functions. It's no surprise to a New Orleanian, to somebody who lives along any part of the Mississippi, Missouri River, that the highest place is near the river. Right? We all know that. There are things that are intuitive. There are things that we remember our elders telling us. There are things that are instilled in us that have come from our ancestors as we have thought about this challenge over time. And we know that all of those knowings, all of those things are inherently rooted in identifying and seeing each other as human beings in that space to figure out how we do this.